This is John Byrne with Poets and Quants. Welcome to our webinar with PwC. This is a prelude to our pre-MBA networking festival in New York City, which will be held on May 7th and 8th. PwC is generously a sponsor of the event, which is terrific. And whoa, today we have Nisha Asher, who is a senior manager in the management consulting practice at PwC. And we are going to be talking about what it's like to work at PwC. So Nisha, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, John. Thank you for having us.
And I should point out that you have a University of Michigan undergraduate degree in both biology and accounting. And then you went on to Duke Fuqua after a little while of working in the pharma business for an MBA. You graduated from Duke in 2014. So tell me, what made you get into consulting?
Yeah, John, that's a fantastic question. I grew up in a very entrepreneurial family, and in that world, we were constantly asked to be very creative, to go out and explore. And as a result of that, as I went through my education and went through some of my formative business experience early on, I came to realize, one, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I knew that I wanted to stay in the healthcare space within pharma, and I knew that I really wanted to help patients in a big and meaningful way, but I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. And so consulting offered me the opportunity of not only getting such vast experience, but then also being able to work with such a diverse set of both colleagues, with clients, and really being able to get a lot of experience in a very fast manner.
Right. And of course, there are a lot of areas within consulting.
Of course,
you had a track record, as you pointed out, in pharma before you even went to Duke. So it might have been a natural transition for you to go back to it. Did you consider other possibilities in consulting or not?
I did. And quite frankly, when I was going through my business school experience, I did not even think that I wanted to go into consulting in my first year. And so as I was thinking through that experience, and as I was thinking through what I wanted to do from a full-time perspective, I interned at a company called Cardinal Health. It's a pharmaceutical distribution company. And the group that I had supported at the time was the corporate development group, as well as the corporate strategy group. So doing a lot of work on identifying different opportunities for Cardinal, being able to work through the due diligence process. And through that process, I got to interact with a number of consultants, both at a variety of different firms, and including my mentor had come in from a previous ex-consultant as well. And I think that really drove towards that experience as well.
How did you know which firm was right for you?
Yeah, so it was very difficult. I think the biggest thing that I would say is, one is, it should be a good cultural match. And so as I was talking to a number of individuals at a variety of consulting firms, there's two different schools of thought. One is, do I want to be a generalist and see different industries, different challenges, and really be able to understand how to really address a problem? Or do I want to be a specialist and really focus around a specific industry, certain types of problems, certain types of clients? And for me, that was driver number one. I really wanted to focus and specialize. Then the second part of that was really around, being a good cultural match and having a good personality match. And as I was talking to a number of individuals across the PwC strategy and teams, very quickly, I came to realize that it was a personality that really matched my own. And these were individuals that not only could I work with, but actually could be friends with outside of work. And especially in consulting, I mean, you're with individuals 24/7. And so it's very, very important that you like the people that you're working with and you're thinking about, problems about life in very similar fashions.
So how would you actually describe PwC's culture?
Yeah, I would say very, very focused on effective teaming. And what I mean by that is, a number of times we're working on projects or opportunities that are global in nature. So I'm working with a variety of different personalities, both in the US as well as other nations and countries across the world. and working with individuals that come from very different backgrounds or have come into consulting from a very different capacity, and being able to then translate all of that into effective work really takes a strong component of that teaming effort. And so very collaborative, very open in terms of that broad breadth of experience, but then also very focused around the specialization that you're looking to gain.
So kind of like Team Fuqua, right?
100%. Team Fuqua, Team Michigan. I came from a very small college town growing up, and a lot of the schools, both undergrad and grad, exact same type of mentality. And so it was just a natural fit to come back to PwC.
And what kind of support have you gotten from PwC since you've been there?
Yeah, so there's a number of, I think, both formal and informal mechanisms that PwC has provided. And like I mentioned earlier, I did not come from a consulting background. So it was a brand new experience for me. It was also something where being on the road all the time, being in a services-oriented organization, when I had not really worked in a services-oriented organization, it was very different from the way I was operating and what I knew from a corporate job perspective. And so there were a number of individuals, both from a formal perspective, that we have, relationship partners, we have coaches, we have buddies, and I had a buddy that came from the Fuqua network, and other individuals that from a formal perspective the firm gives to you in order to be able to talk through progression and expectations and things like that. From an informal perspective, though, a number of large communities and really fun events that PwC does, and a lot of social events to really bring the office that you're in and the market that you're in together. And so I think both of those areas, that's where I've gotten most of my support.
That's great. And if you were to describe like a week in the life of a consultant at PwC at your level, what would that look like? Like on Monday, do you start packing your suitcases, or you do that Sunday night, or you don't do that at all? How much time you spend with clients, how much with your team, how much traveling versus in your base office? How many different assignments you may work on at one time? I'm assuming it's only one, but give us a feel for what a typical week might be like for you.
Well, I'll give you a typical consulting answer. It depends.
It depends.
It depends. It depends on the week. It depends on the project. It depends on the client. But I would say on average, when you start off your career in consulting, and at PwC, if you're coming out of an MBA, you'd be starting as a senior associate. And typically when you're coming in at that role, you're working with one client. These projects can vary from 6 weeks to 3 months, 6 months to even a year or longer, again, depending on the client and what you're working on. But then as you continue to progress through your career, especially for me now, I'm working on multiple accounts, multiple projects at any given time. I'm on the road Monday through Thursday. I'm usually packing Monday morning, taking 10 minutes, whatever I can throw into my bag, and then unpacking Thursday nights and kind of going through that cycle over and over. And then there's a number, and this is where consulting is very interesting, is there's a number of internal initiatives and thought leadership that you're constantly involved in. And so if you take a look at what's happening out in the marketplace, both from a political standpoint, economic standpoint, sociocultural standpoint, all of these factors, we are constantly playing in the market to understand what's happening, how is that market going to evolve over the next 10, 15 years, and how do we start to bring that impact back into our clients. And so it's really fun to be able to even go out of your typical project or typical client, really understand what's happening there and bring it all together across all of these informal activities that you're doing as well.
So it sounds challenging, and I know obviously you can't refer to any clients by name, but I wonder if you can give us a sense of the kinds of variety of projects that you've worked on at PwC on behalf of clients.
Yeah, and so I'll talk a little bit specifically to the healthcare space, the space that I currently sit in. But I've done a number of projects from helping sort through some of the pandemics or epidemiology challenges similar to the current coronavirus situation.
Wow. Okay.
I've done a number of projects where we are helping private pharmacos, biotech, life science organizations form partnerships with other public or federal agencies. I've worked on projects where we've done product launching, relaunching, and really assessing, the market position of a product or a compound, and how do we translate that better into better value for patients and again, better positioning.
Right.
A lot of the activity that I'm doing currently is really focused around the M&A space. So anything from identifying opportunities for our respective clients to helping them think through the pre-deal integration work, post-deal integration, right? How do you actually operationalize on some of those ideas and those partnerships, collaborations, working on those aspects. And then some of my favorite work is really from helping our clients think about their growth strategy over the next 5 to 10 years. So are there new service lines? Are there new regions or sites that they should be looking at? How do they effectively grow while managing a lot of cost efficiencies and things like that? And so, huge variety in the type of work that we do. And I would say it's highly dependent on both the industry you're working in, but also the groups that you're working in. And the one thing I would say with PwC that's very different than some of the other consulting firms is that PwC is very niche and very specialized. When you come into a group, you're typically coming in not only to an industry, but a lot of times into a competency or a function within that type of world. And so, again, that type of work you might be doing will highly, highly vary based on the type of work that you do and the background that you're coming in with.
That's a very cool range of projects that you've been involved in. And they all sound pretty intellectually challenging as well. I imagine that your own personal growth in the firm and with these assignments has been astronomical.
Absolutely. I mean, I think the biggest thing that I have learned how to do is not only manage teams and managing, financials and budgets and economics, things that you wouldn't necessarily get in an industry job right away, maybe in a more senior role. But more so than that, I've gotten so much exposure to individuals, colleagues, both on the client side and internal across the globe. So working with different personalities, different cultures, understanding how different market dynamics work and how do, pharma companies or the pharmaceutical world differ from the US to Japan to Europe to other countries in Asia and across the world. But then also being able to really sit at the table with senior executives and see the types of problems and challenges that they're facing and how are they driving their decision making? What are the levers of influence that they need to pull? And really being able to, it's very humbling when a senior executive who's been in the industry for 20, 30 years, more than you, is coming to you and asking you for advice on how you see a certain challenge or your opinion on how to address a certain challenge, and being able to be at that table to have that conversation is just a very cool thing.
Yeah, no, I would imagine that's very flattering and very daunting at the same time.
Yeah, yes, absolutely.
Now, I know PwC considers diversity and inclusion a very important issue in its culture. Yeah. Can you tell me how their initiatives in diversity and inclusion have actually impacted you?
Yeah, so I'll speak about it in maybe two factors. There's a number of initiatives that impact me personally, and that PwC really tries to bring out, and I'll kind of keep it to simple examples. But then even more so than that, there's a big push and I think an openness to be able to bring that back to our clients. And when we're thinking about, talent development and what the future of the workforce is going to look like, there's a number of factors that will change that, whether it's automation and digital means, whether it's globalization in nature and, more virtual ways of working. But then diversity and inclusion is really an important factor. And so as we're thinking about And as PwC tries to break down a lot of the challenges that have historically been in place in large corporations, we're starting to bring those solutions back to our clients as well. And so for me, being a female leader, there's been a huge emphasis on, I think, two things. One is making sure that from a progression standpoint, I'm afforded the same opportunities as my other colleagues are being provided. Coming from an ethnic background, I think that there is a recognition that I might be bringing a different perspective or a different, point of view to the table. And quite often, leadership is coming back and calling me to ask, how do we manage a certain situation? Do you see something differently that we're missing? And I think at the end of the day, to me, diversity inclusion really means looking past the visual or the physical aspects of an individual, irrespective of gender, race, sex, any of that, and really being able to look at the qualifications. Is that person qualified and the right person for the role? And I think that truly lives within PwC and the way that those opportunities are presented to you and progression is presented.
Right. Now, are you part of any inclusion networks at PwC? And I'm wondering how they might support you.
Yeah, I'm part of a number of them. One of the big ones that I'm part of is a group that we called Women in Technology. And so it's for, of course, women that have some sort of STEM background, scientific or technology background. And through that network, that's, I think, another informal mechanism of how I get a lot of my support. And so if I'm facing some sort of situation, that's where I can talk to other individuals that might be facing the same challenge and understanding how they've dealt with it. A number of individuals that have tried to start a family and have kids during the process of going up for promotion to director or partner in some of these senior roles where you're really out of the house every single day, and how do you start to manage through those types of situations. Individuals where going back to school or going back for higher education is really important thing. So how do you start to deal through those situations? And so really being able to talk to people about your own personal life, even outside of your client work and what's happening from a professional standpoint, and making sure that that's not hindering your progress in the long term. And so that Women in Technology group has been fantastic. And then we have a very strong diversity inclusion network that we have both formal and informal mentors within each respective group and market and things like that. And so there's a number of initiatives and trainings and education and conferences that we're continuously hosting, both for the market as well as for individuals at the firm, that provide more clarity on, again, how to handle certain situations. How do you bring this to your client? Things like that.
So you're not only learning and developing yourself on the job, PwC is investing in you as well.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Support mechanisms. So, Nisha, I'm a last-minute hacker on my trips as well. And I'm trying to imagine you on the Monday morning, frantically stuffing clothes and other items into your suitcase before you go off for your, consulting gig.
It's one of the skills you learn, how to be very efficient about packing and how do you get to the airport with 15 minutes to your flight.
You have clear.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, but how do you stay healthy traveling as a consultant, being on the road and working so hard?
Yeah. So as I'm sure you know, that was very traditionally a challenge, I think, in the consulting world for a number of years. And PwC has highly invested in this initiative that's called Be Well, Work Well. And so through that initiative, there are expectations, both from a leadership perspective, but then also from a project team perspective, that you're really putting forth the time and energy to prioritize your physical well-being, your emotional well-being, your spiritual well-being, other types of well-being as well. And so for me personally, I make an effort to go for a run or go to a yoga class or spin class or things like that. And being able to do that with my team as well is a really fun team building exercise, but then we're also holding each other accountable to make sure that we're exercising. We're being on the road all that time, you're constantly eating out. And so we try to make an effort to go to the grocery store or try to eat healthy at
Yeah,
least 1 or 2 days a
that's
week.
really
And
hard when
again,
you're on the road.
very
Okay.
difficult to do so.
Mm,
And so being able to have other people there who are sharing in that need and in that want with you is just a fantastic way of doing that. And then outside of that, PwC offers a number of free solutions as well around being able to enforce that. So we have something that's called Gym Pass, and so PwC will offer um, a monthly stipend that the firm covers, so that you can apply that to the different gyms that you might be going to. We have a program that's called Ginger the app. So if you want a virtual therapist, you can go and talk to someone about any problems you might be facing.
right.
And there's a number of all these apps and or services that PwC offers that you can elect into if you choose to do so.
That's great. And I'm just going to mention to our audience, we are going to answer a few questions at the end of this, and I'm going to have my last question first before we do that. So, Nisha, what do you like most about working for PwC?
For me, it's all about the culture and it's all about the exposure. I love the individuals that I'm working with, and I also love the fact that I get to experience all of these different projects and different clients and different markets, different regions with those people. And so the biggest component that I would tell everyone who's joined us here today is, as you're going through this process, really, really emphasize the focus on cultural match with whichever organization, consulting or otherwise, because at the end of the day, that's what's really going to drive your happiness long term.
Right, totally. And whether or not you're consulting in the area that you're passionate about, that you care
Yeah,
about, that matters to you, I think. And in your case, it certainly does, because
yeah,
your track has been very linear, which just shows how passionate you are about the field of healthcare and life sciences.
yeah, yeah.
So here's a question, and I think this is an obvious question that people have about working in consulting, and it's whether or not GMAT scores are important to get a consulting job. It's generally believed that they are. What's your sense of that?
So if you're applying to consulting, if you're using an MBA as a platform to be able to pivot into consulting, I would say no. Majority of the consulting interview process is really focused around case studies, being able to case well and being able to talk through the way that you logically think through a problem, how you're structuring it, things like that. But then also, again, I'm going to emphasize the cultural match there, but really being able to see, are you a personality match? Are you passionate about the type of work we do? Here's the type of projects we do. Is this something that you'd be interested in? So from an MBA perspective, I would say no, really, really focus around making sure that you're attending the consulting events that the firm might be hosting, making sure that you're really getting to know people and understanding truly the type of projects that they might be working on and what your role would be. Because again, even within PwC, a large organization, we have a number of different groups. And so depending on the group, you might be working on very, very different types of projects.
Right. Here's another question. How important is an internship at the firm in getting a full-time job offer?
So I personally did not intern at PwC, and I was still not only got an offer, but I've been very successful in my trajectory here. I would say that an internship is great to be able to explore whether or not consulting is the right fit for you, and whether or not a certain firm is the right fit for you. So I would say absolutely explore it. But if you do want to experience other things and come back to consulting as a full-time opportunity, it by no means do you have to do an internship in order to be able to get a full-time role?
And in your case, Nisha, what internship did you do?
So I actually did two separate internships. I did one at Cardinal Health, which I was working in their corporate development and corporate strategy groups. And then the second, I was working at a pharma company called Bristol Myers Squibb, and I was working within their one of their medical affairs organizations. So again, both were not at all consulting and very industry focused, but I had met many people along that internship experience that really pushed me towards consulting, and I've clearly really enjoyed my experience
I
so
also
far.
think, again, that's part of the linear path that you've taken.
Yeah.
Way back from your undergraduate years when you majored in biology.
Yeah,
It
absolutely.
makes total sense. And actually, on some level, I would be thinking that it makes you an even more desirable candidate to become a consultant, having had those two different experiences.
Yeah, and I think that for a firm like PwC, not only education is valuable, but the experience that you're coming in with is very, very highly valuable, because that's where you're, and I think this is true of business schools as well. The way that you look at classrooms and how those discussions are held, you're talking to your classmates, you're sharing experiences, and you're sharing those stories, and that's how you learn. I think that's the exact same thing that happens in consulting, is that you're sharing your stories, you're learning from others. And so having that industry experience is always, always a plus.
So here's a question from Ricardo Phillips. He asks, is strategy and fully integrated into PwC? And has the integration gone well?
Yeah, well, great question, Ricardo. I would say yes and no. So when you're looking at it simply from a recruiting standpoint, recruiting into strategy and versus PwC will be two different pathways. And depending on the MBA school that you're in, and depending on, at the time that you're applying, it might be a little bit of a different process. That being said, from a day-to-day perspective, I'm commonly working with individuals both on strategy and folks, as well as PwC folks, day in, day out. And so the way that our projects are run and the way that we see each other, there's not really a delineation in the way that we're operating. It's more of the way that things are marketed, that the delineation is still there.
Right. Here's a question from Patrick Green. Are there any tips or keys you might have in getting a position in healthcare consulting? Now, you did those two internships, which suggested how improved how interested you are in the field. You have the biology major as well. Are there other things that you need to kind of line up if you really have your heart set on healthcare consulting?
Yeah, I would say whether it's healthcare or a different industry, some of the things that I did during my business school experience that really set me up well was, one, I'd gone to Duke that had a specialized health sector management program that really allowed me to take classes and really learn what's happening in the industry, talk to professors that were pertinent in the market and really were coming from a industry perspective and could share that insight. Two was I joined a lot of the healthcare clubs through the programs to be able to really network with my colleagues, as well as, again, learn from them quite a bit. And then Duke also had a program called the Fuqua Client Consulting Practicum. And so during one of the semesters during school, they offered us an opportunity to work with a respective healthcare organization and really be able to solve a problem. And so that I did that my second year in order to be able to get an experience of what consulting might feel like and if that was helpful. And that was certainly something that helped me during my interview process as well.
Yeah, those are great examples of how to shape your MBA experience and tailor it in a way that to your advantage to leverage that then into a really good job. Because even though the MBA degree is generally a general management degree, there are all these opportunities that you can take to get us to specialize, to dive deeper, which you certainly did.
And I would say the biggest thing that's been helpful even to date, and I graduated a number of years ago now, is the network that you form. And so I would say really, classes are important, your learning experience is important, but the biggest thing that I would emphasize focusing on is really learning and forming relationships with your classmates, because as you continue to think through your trajectory and growing within whichever industry that you're focused in on, that network is what you're going to rely back on in order to be able to get other jobs, to understand what's happening at prospective clients, what's happening within the industry. To this day, I'm very close with a number of my Fuqua classmates and very easily can reach out to them at any given point of time to understand their perspectives on things, or create connections for me. And that the importance of that is probably the highest value that I gained from my MBA program.
Right. I should point out too that, I think that healthcare is the next frontier for the MBAs. Historically, very small percentages of MBAs have gone into healthcare, but this is such a massive, important field in the economy today, and it's ripe for disruption.
Yeah.
And frankly, Nisha, whether you want to or not, you are laying the groundwork for a great opportunity to be an entrepreneur, to do a startup sometime that's very disruptive in one element of healthcare, because you're getting all this great experience as a consultant at these different companies, seeing these different challenges that they're facing. We have one last question, then we're going to let you go.
Sure.
It's from David Wilcox, who is a returned Peace Corps volunteer who's interested in getting an MBA, and he's wondering, this is a more general question that I think you'd be great to answer, what should he be looking for in applying to a school?
Yeah, so I when I was evaluating business schools, I actually went into what I term analysis paralysis. So I created a major Excel sheet. I had all these decision points, all of this stuff. For me, what it came down to, though, reflecting back on it, was three main things. One was it a school that afforded me the jobs that I potentially want to do after graduation? And so I'd say one of the biggest areas that you should look at is what companies are coming to that respective school. Is that a type of company or job that I'd want to do? And that's one big factor. The second part was I had really wanted to go to a school that would afford me a large international experience, and Duke was one of the schools that had one of the highest percentages of international students to domestic students. And so that was another big factor for me. And the third part was, as I was thinking through MBA programs, there's a number of getting to know the business school type of events that occur, whether it's, the different forums and conferences that you can go to, or even the school will likely have a number of events at their own schools. And I would attend a number of these things, again, to figure out, is this the right culture? Is this the right personality image? Things like that. And as soon as I stepped on the grounds of Duke, and as soon as I met a lot of the people there, it felt like home to me. It felt right to me. And that washed away my entire decision matrix, and none of that really mattered. So just focus on, what are the opportunities I want long-term? Is this a school that is going to give me the type of classmates and experience that I personally want? And then three is this the right personality mix for me? And am I going to be happy during my years here? But then also, am I going to be able to formulate those long-term relationships?
Well, you went to a great school, a great MBA program. Duke does an amazing job. And the culture there is very special.
Fantastic. And great basketball team.
That's a plus. Plus the weather's a plus. There are places to go where, the weather's not nearly as nice as it is down there in Durham. So
absolutely.
That was fantastic. So Nisha, thank you so much for doing this. We really appreciate it. And for anyone else out there, I just should say that PwC is a sponsor of our pre-MBA networking festival, which is in New York City, May 7th and 8th. It's a great opportunity for people who have already been admitted to a top MBA program, but are not yet students, because the idea of this is for people to get an early start. If you don't know what to do, in one day you could visit an investment banking firm, a CPG firm, a consulting firm, a tech firm, even a government agency to get a sense for what you might want to do early on. The earlier you get on track, the more productive and the more satisfied you're going to be with your MBA. The other thing is, if you know what you want to do, you could go and visit 5 different consulting firms and get a sense for each of their cultures, what they do with MBAs when they're immediately hired, what it takes to get hired. People are incredibly generous in giving email addresses and phone numbers to give you advice. It's a great opportunity also to meet the incoming class at a whole variety of schools, both in the U.S. And in Europe. So we hope to see you on May 7th and 8th. Meantime, Nisha, congratulations on what I see is already an exceptional career. You have great future ahead of you. We're really proud of you for showing Duke so well.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate being here today too. I'm looking forward to meeting all of you guys at the conference.
That'd be terrific.
Yeah.
All right, we'll see you then. This is John,
All right.
the Poets and Quants. Thanks for watching.